Alright, picking up where we left off last time, which was hydropower. I said we weren't going to go into the specifics of any of the renewables, but we're going to do that this time, at least some of them. So, hydropower. Hydro water, power, power. It's basically going to do the exact same process that we've talked about the entire unit, which means we're going to take something, water in this case, to spin a turbine, which is connected to a generator, which then creates electricity. Ultimately, all we're trying to do is find something to spin a turbine, which then is connected to a generator, which then creates electricity. How do we do it? Well, we got a bunch of different ways, so let's talk about them. Why do we use hydropower? Well, water's everywhere. We have the water cycle, and some of you ask, why do we keep studying the water cycle? Sorry. But it's everywhere. It's renewable. The water's not going to run out. And if the water runs out, then power's probably not really what our concern is if we don't have any water. So we're going to have it. It is clean. It's non-polluting. And once the dam and everything is built, then it's really cost effective. It's about the same thing as coal power, so you're not even paying more. You don't have that stigma that's attached to renewables, which it's way more expensive. Yeah, I know we should use it, but it's way more expensive. We don't even have that. But as I've said the whole time, there are pros and there are cons to everything. So what are some of the cons to hydropower? Well, you can go through on the slide and read them all in detail. But basically, when we're talking about building dams or stopping up water systems or anything like that to get hydropower, we got to think of the ecological impacts of it. We're not getting nitrogen or any of those things that water carries downstream. We're not getting sediments. We're not getting the silts. We're not getting things that flood farmlands. And this is like a positive flooding. It's not a, destroy homes kind of flooding. We're not getting any of that moved downstream. It's getting backed up somewhere way up where the dam is. And in that reservoir, we see sedimentation. Well, it's all that sediment, it's all that stuff that's in the water that can't make it downstream gets built up back there. Well, the water stops moving, and what happens when water stops moving and light's hitting it? Well, it's easier to evaporate. So we have all these problems, and then we hit the ecological problems of we're messing up animals moving up and down the stream, and we're messing up ecosystems behind it because we're kind of flooding that when it's not supposed to. The downstream area is not getting flooded. Is hydropower good? Sure. Should we be careful with it? Definitely. But what's another pro to hydropower? Well, it's consistent. A river's going to run the way a river runs, and we're going to get that power pretty much consistently unless something drastic happens. And again, if something drastic happens, the power's probably not our concern. But what's the downside to it? It's consistent. If we need more power, we can't just make the river run faster. If we need less power, we can't make the river run slower. And yeah, we have these storage pumps where we can pump more through the turbines to get more electricity made, but that's not sustainable. Like, that pump is eventually going to run out of water. Or we can turn some of them off, but that's wasting electricity production, because then we just have water going through the turbines and they're not connected to anything, and it's just not being used. So pros, cons, I don't know. Let's weigh it out. But hydropower is a possible solution, and it's the largest of all of the renewables for right now anyway, of what we're trying to transition away from fossil fuels with. In a similar sense, if you remember back to astronomy, when I told you that not just water is a fluid, but also air is a fluid, well, the next fluid we're going to talk about is wind energy. And how does wind energy work? Well, hopefully you've seen pictures of those large wind turbines that the Plain States have, and we have some here in North Carolina as well. And if you've ever been up to Boone, to Appalachian, there's a giant one on top of the mountain that's part of the Appalachian Renewables and Sustainables program. But we have these all over the place in the United States. And what does it do? Well, it takes wind and it spins a turbine, which is connected. You get the idea. Wind, not going away. If wind goes away, again, like water, we have bigger problems than the wind not having the power anymore. So what are some of the pros? Renewable, clean, not polluting. Once the turbine is built, it's really about the same price as coal again. We're not paying extra for it. And these turbines now have been engineered to last an incredibly long time with little maintenance needed. So even though, yes, we do have to send engineers and technicians and everything out to make sure it's running properly, and these things can be huge, like the blades can be 80, 100, 120 meters long, so longer than a football field on some of the larger ones. they run pretty well. They don't really need that much maintenance overall, which makes them cheap. However, what are some of the downsides? Well, wind doesn't blow all the time. It doesn't produce that much energy unless you have a lot of wind turbines together, which we call wind farms. Some people don't like the looks of them. It can disrupt ecological factors again if you don't plan ahead and understand what's going on in that area. It can be, if you're close to it, noisy. Again, lots of pros, got some cons. Well, I don't know what the answer is. We got to figure out, what does it mean? Do we not use it because of those things, or do we use it and say we got to deal with it? I don't know. That's what we got to figure out. Next one up is geothermal energy. Well, geo, we already talked about this in astronomy. Geo, earth. Thermal, heat. Heat from the earth, geothermal energy. Now this one's probably the one that you know the least about because it's not really that talked about and it's not really that applicable here. Now, can we use it here? Yes, and actually, when the new high school was being built, we considered putting a geothermal heat pump in to help with some of our energy costs. Now, ultimately, it was scrapped because these are kind of expensive and they do kind of need a bit of maintenance to go along with them. But we can use them here in North Carolina. But it's not the best place to use them, and we'll get to the best place to use all these, and I have a map for you to help you keep them separated. But we know that it's not the best place to use it here. But how does this work? Well, we send water down an injection well, and we, send it through the Earth's heat. I just told you that, which then turns to steam, which then is, you know where this is going. But we use that to create electricity in places that have a lot of heat inside the earth. And this is renewable, it's sustainable, and it's not really that polluting. The downsides can be expensive, can't be used everywhere. So we got to figure it out again. Like we talked about in class, there's no one answer to any of this. We didn't just use one energy source before. We're not going to use just one energy source afterwards. So we have to figure out the best thing to do. What's going to work here, what's going to work there, what's going to work over there. And we got to figure out what's going to work for us here in Davie or in North Carolina, whichever one, because like it or not, we're running out of fossil fuels. So regardless of what you think and regardless of if you care about the environmental part, then we still have to have a plan because they're going to go away. But there's still one missing. And it might be the one that you think the most of with renewables, and that's solar energy. But I bet you're only thinking of half of the equation to solar energy. Now, what does this do? Well, it takes the sun and doesn't just make steam to spin a turbine. We have two different types of solar energy. Now, you know about photovoltaic cells or solar panels. That's the obvious one. Why is sun so, prevalent? Well, it's the sun. It's everywhere. There's enough solar power that hits the earth that if we could build the solar panels to harness it, we would have our electricity needs and our energy needs taken care of. The problem is, we can't build enough solar panels in the right place to take care of all of our energy needs. So we have to be careful about what we do and how we use them and how efficient these panels are. But let's get to that in a second. The first one is the one that you've probably never heard of, and this is called parabolic solar collection. And what it is, and if you watch Switch, you've already seen it, it's the thing they used in Spain. They take curved mirror-looking things and they direct it to a single point, and in this case, they do take water and make it steam and spin a turbine and all that stuff. Yeah, the downside to this, it's pretty expensive. It can be difficult to use and it can be difficult to maintain. The other one are photovoltaic cells or PV cells or solar panels. These don't. This is going to be the one that doesn't take any kind of energy and then make steam and then turbines and generators and all that. This is going to take those electrons that we talked about, and this is going to be a direct to electricity type of conversion from solar energy into electricity. And it's going to break these electrons away and create a current, and it's going to create electricity out of the solar panel. Now, here's the thing. While we are getting a lot better, and maybe some of you looked at the Sunshot Initiative, and we're trying to make solar a lot cheaper because it is everywhere, solar's still the expensive one. Panels are getting cheaper, panels are getting better, they're getting more efficient, we're being able to, and we have some out in the CTE building for the Warrego Motorsports project where we have flexible solar panels now. They're pretty cool. They output a certain voltage that we can use for the car, but it's still more expensive. So what we have to do is really work on this technology to make it cheaper. Now, again, pros and cons to everything. Doesn't pollute, doesn't create any kind of excess stuff. Now, yeah, and the production of it, maybe, depending on what you're making your circuit with, you can be a little worried about that. But overall, again, another clean energy, but a little expensive, and the sun doesn't shine all the time. So what do we use? It's a great question. We got to figure that out together, and it's going to be based on where we're going to end this notes video, our geography, and what we can do in the places that we live. For this time, think about where we might use these different renewables. I'll talk to you soon.